Hello, listeners. This is the Risky Planner Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Hi, Albert.
Hey, Nate.
It is actually a wild time, right now. Canada building, war in Iran still going. Actually, the last podcast we recorded couldn't be more relevant still, even with the ceasefire, right?
For sure. Yeah.
Cost for projects. I don't know where we're going. It's going to be
well, to the extent that like the last
sad.
20 years or 30 years or whatever have been about globalization and, building integrated supply chains and stuff, like the next 20 years might be about undoing that somewhat. And it could be true that countries like Canada that had previously been reliant on trade relationships with, close neighbors, need for strategic reasons and economic reasons to become uncoupled from those near neighbors. And wouldn't that be interesting?
What neighbors do you speak of? I was going to say China's already doing it big time.
Well, they're kind of like the electric superpower right now, right? Like they're the leaders in renewables, they're the leaders in electric cars, they're the leaders in battery storage in terms of like deploying those things.
Rare earth metals the largest that make the batteries.
So they've got a lot of the basic mineral inputs already in house. Not to mention it's a managed economy there, so they only sell what they want to, which is increasingly looking like it will be not very much, if anything. Not to mention the fact that there's a big nuclear push around the world, everywhere except Germany, basically, where they denuclearized and are now overly reliant on fossil fuels. And wouldn't you know it, their energy prices have gone up pretty dramatically in the last few months.
You don't
Weird.
say.
I know, it's weird. But anyway, everybody else is building nuclear, and China is building it at the rate of the whole other rest of the world combined.
Germany is interesting, though. You think that was a big mistake?
I do think it was a mistake. I think it was short-sighted. I don't know very much about what their operation looked like, like I haven't done the deep dive on what those places, how much they cost, right? Like were they maintenance nightmares? Like were they money pits? Maybe this was a financial decision, but it feels like right now the world's first permanent nuclear waste storage facility opened like earlier this week, right? So we've been running nuclear reactors without a place to permanently, store the waste for 70 years?
Yeah.
Right. If you're Germany and you're heavily reliant on a technology that has no end game, right? I can understand why that would be. I still think that's short-sighted because like you don't have nuclear storage, so build some. Like overcome the NIMBYism, build some, do the hard work, and let's all kind of pull behind this as some kind of necessary evil. That's the way that I would tackle it if I were Germany, but I'm not.
That reminds me of this meme where this girl is talking about people that don't have homes, and she's like, well, just build them. Okay.
Yeah, just get out there, build
But
one.
Germany definitely has the resources.
That.
And it was kind of a knee-jerk reaction, I think, right? There was
that's what
Japan
it felt like.
and the tsunami, and, what is that, over a decade ago? Nuclear scary, freak accident.
And you know what? Nuclear scary? Yeah.
It's clean, though.
Yeah, nuclear scary. But it is clean, and, a lot of the other effects of building nuclear are very manageable. It really is just the disposition of the high-level waste, like, does it go forever?
Well, speaking of nuclear, we're going to talk about Ontario and Canada as a whole. I mean, just Ontario alone, I think the government has announced it's over $200 billion with a B for nuclear builds, right? And then it's
that tracks.
Just the province, right? And it's, if you look at Canada as a whole, it's hundreds of billions of dollars that have been committed to all kinds of things: energy, mining, minerals, transportation, infrastructure, et cetera. So we're gonna dive into that, aren't we?
Yeah, I think Carney was. By the way, this is going to be a very Canada-focused episode. So if you want to know what's going on in the capital projects world in Canada, this is the show for you. But even so, I think it's pointing at a trend. Mark Carney gave that really impressive Middle Powers speech
at Davos
a few months back. Yeah. So, he's also at Davos talking about how we're going to be spending $1 trillion on capital projects in Canada in the next few years. That's a big, big number considering how hard it has been to build anything here for the past 10 or so. And you can tack that onto the liberal government or overreaching environmentalism or, NIMBYism or people just saying no without reason. Like you can say all those things if you want to. We're not going to get into any of that. We're going to talk about how we build the future here.
But there's a big problem with that number that we're going to address in this episode, right? And that's the costs. And when Carney says $1 trillion, you basically, he means like 2 or 3 trillion. We're going to have to face the facts, right?
And those facts being that you don't build a capital project for the sticker price on day one. You build it for rather a lot more than that. Like there's only a handful of industries that are capable of executing to their original budgets and schedules, right? And the ones that we're talking about, like nuclear, for example, are emphatically not among those industries, right? So good example. Like we've got the Darlington Unit 4 completion. We were a part of that, right? Like we built the PMO that kicked off the Darlington refurbishment. They're still using our processes and our tool stack, over 10 years later. So like the Dokainish Company PMO build was pretty durable and did a really nice job of controlling cost and schedule on the Darlington refurb, right? And you were, correct me if I'm wrong, but you had a meeting about this
actually
right?
We were in a meeting with some of them I won't name the minister, but I was with his staff and we were having a conversation about Dokanish's involvement with Ontario Power Generation and a bunch of other different projects that we've worked on. And the question came up, how does the minister know, how do you know that the sticker price that you're given in these meetings, in these briefings is accurate, right? How do you know that the timeline that is being presented is accurate? And they didn't really have a good answer, right? They, relying on experts, but there wasn't a data-driven answer. They didn't have that, which isn't surprising. I mean, not everyone can be an expert in a capital project, but when you're talking about, public works projects that are going to have lasting value over a course of generations, I think, there's a need, there's an educational opportunity. But it was an interesting meeting.
That's the right way to put it.
It was an interesting meeting.
That's absolutely the right way to put it. We shouldn't be expecting government ministers and members of parliament or politicians anywhere in the world to be capital project execution experts. That's not their job, right? Like they are specialists in their field, theoretically, of making laws happen and executing them and enforcing them and changing them and making sure that the apparatus of government continues to be functional like far into the future. And that includes nation building projects like this. But for those, you need some kind of, either you need internal expertise, which makes, bureaucracy a big issue. And there are some areas of internal expertise within the Canadian government. But the answer, as an American, the one that I always point to is NASA, right? Like that is a government administration and it is absolutely stocked with technocrats, right? There's people who are industry experts, who are engineering experts, who are scientists, who know the stuff. Right, it's not a political. I mean, it's a political football, but it is not itself a political.
There's the
entity,
Space Force
right?
now, which is that's a thing.
The Space Force.
But is it funny? Like here it is, two Americans, now Canadians talking about Canada. Like it's just kind of a funny. I wanted to call that out because
it is. Yeah, like who better to talk about Canada than a couple of Americans?
NASA has lots of technocrats. They have innovated. They have tested and brought new technologies to market.
Yeah, and like Canada has things like that, but there's a lot of stuff that it doesn't have. And like one of the things that it kind of sticks out to me is that just because Darlington went well doesn't mean that every single nuclear build is going to go well, right? Not all projects are created equal, and they're certainly not all created equal when you exit sector, like exit the nuclear sector, start talking about trains, right? Like high-speed rail in North America is a gigantic disaster, right? So, and that's a big part of the nation building, scheme that Carney's been releasing through the MPO. There's a lot of nuclear, there's a lot of infrastructure, highways and trains. we can't pin our future successes on past ones. Past performance not being necessarily a great indicator of future success, right? Plus, like, even if it were, a lot of those other industries don't look great. Like Alberta's one and only MPO project is a carbon capture and storage project. Carbon capture and storage across the globe for the past 25 plus years has been a story about failure, right? They don't sequester the carbon they're supposed to. They go massively over on budget. They have to be dismantled early. Like, that's it, from Alberta until this new MOU, which we'll get into later.
It's an interesting, the whole carbon capture, carbon credits, like, it's a wild industry. It's a bit of like smoke and mirrors in a lot of ways, right?
Where we're doing this project to capture, sequester, and eventually utilize, carbon emissions. So that makes it green, right? No.
Yeah, when you're like a company says, "Oh, we're net, carbon zero." I mean, or not net carbon zero. You know what I mean? Like, just net.
Yeah, like we're carbon
emissions,
neutral, or we're net zero.
Yeah,
and it means you bought a bunch of offsets, and that's still good, right?
It's
that's still
good, but it should be accurate. Like, and this is a marketing problem. This is not, a company problem. This is a marketing problem. Marketing probably came up with this, so I blame my people.
Well, it's a compromise, right? Like anything the government does, it has to be rooted in compromise, and that's part of the reason why. Even if we take that $1 trillion of investments, or the $200 billion for Ontario that you mentioned, like, take any of those numbers at face value, there is going to be pressure on the cost and the schedule. That's just the way that projects work.
Can you,
right?
Albert? Can you? What's the data? Why? Like, when we said at the beginning, it's going to be, he's missing $1 trillion, he's missing $2 trillion from that. What's the data say?
Yeah, so we're going to cite our favorite researcher here. One Professor Bent Flyvberg. He has a database that he's been building for the past, I want to say, 25, 30 years. But it covers projects more like over the past 100 years.
Yeah.
And there's over 16,000 projects in his database. Of those projects, 91.5% go over on budget or schedule or both. And it's not uncommon for projects to exceed either one of those things by 50% of their planned value or more.
Yeah. So 9 out of 10 projects go over budget. Let that sink in.
Yeah. And you've seen us quote that statistic on LinkedIn and in marketing and stuff. Like, if you guys follow us, on LinkedIn, you've seen that number before. That's where it comes from. But it's not the only source of it anyway. It's pretty commonly understood, especially if you're in projects world, that you are going to see growth in your projects one way or another, right? And when we talk to clients who are, patting themselves on the back for an on-time, on-budget performance, 9 times out of 10, the way they did that was by cutting scope, which amounts to the same thing. Like, you did less of a project for the same money. Like, congratulations.
Yeah,
you still overran.
You bring up a good point. Like, I know that Darlington is held up as a success story, right? You're talking about reducing scope. Darlington rebuilt, they've got their reactors. Like, Darlington's held up as a success story. Like, is it? Or is it is there something else at play?
Well, it most definitely is.
Yeah.
It most definitely is a success story. But there's lots of reasons to believe that it may not necessarily be a transferable success story.
How's that? When you say transferable success story, does that mean, like, taking the systems and and then moving that to another industry, like the trains?
Yeah, it's like, the Army took Hill A, so it's on to Hill B, right? Well, Hill A and Hill B have different paths up to the summit. They have different defenses on the way. Like, they've got different, you've got a different group of people going to, this is the main one. There's a different group of people who's going to go take Hill B, right?
Yeah.
So if Hill A is being held by the people who took Hill A, and a different group of people is going to take Hill B, you tell me if they get to benefit from the experience of the Hill A people or not.
I'm just going to wait on Hill C to see how it all shakes out.
Right? Well, it's funny you should say that, because we don't know how things are going to perform until we've had a few of these under our belts in different industries, right? Even within the same industry, like, that same team isn't necessarily the one that's going to go work on Pickering, for example. And even if it did, the Pickering plant is different. It's a different scope of work.
It's almost twice as much, I think, right? Isn't it?
It's a bigger project. Yeah. It has to replace a bunch of steam generators. Darlington didn't replace the steam generators as part of this, tranche of work. You have a new PMO like push, like to modernize, which is a good thing, right? Like OPG and any large project organization, they should be modernizing, right? Getting their PMO up to speed every few years. And so they're doing that, which means that like the successful PMO practices that gave them success on Darlington, they're counting on seeing those get incrementally better over time as they do Pickering, but they're going to be doing it with a new team, with a new scope, with new PMO, new tools, right? Like it's not the same organization. Like I said, that's not a bad thing. Like you should expect organizations to improve, but expecting all the same stuff to translate from project to project, even when they seem substantially similar, just isn't necessarily safe.
How is the the transfer of knowledge from this, team A to team B, let's say Darlington to Pickering, like let's say it's a different team. What is like a company, like, well, not a company, I mean like truly an enterprise, a massive operation. How are they transferring knowledge in between these different, I guess they're portfolios, but these different major projects? Is that happening?
Well, it doesn't happen automatically.
It doesn't.
I mean, it's definitely happening because like the Darlington program captured somewhere around 8,000 lessons learned while they were executing. Okay. One of those has to be about the impacts of COVID because that's a very, very long program, right? So the longer your program is, the more likely you're going to experience one of these, Roger, forgive me for saying this, but black swan events, like these, low probability, high impact, right? One of the, like, you may remember BC Hydro's lessons learned report on Site C, which they published late last year. They specifically documented that the Site C build failed to budget for those low probability, high impact risks. OPG rebudgeted for them, which again is to their credit. But like Site C just had to, I'm not familiar enough with how they manage those kinds of issues. But the point is that for long programs of work, you need to count on at least some of those hitting, which means you need higher p-values, right? Like higher confidence intervals to plan at, so that you have the influence of those low-high risks in your model, right?
Yeah, COVID was truly it was a black swan, right? Like people were predicting, maybe Obama said something about, oh, there's going to be a virus that's airborne someday. Like there was, an idea that it would happen, but it felt like a black swan. I mean, the scale
of Obama
it.
has said many, many times. Yeah, I mean, the fact that it was a pandemic is unfortunate. Like the two politicians who probably did the most to sound the alarm about something like COVID before COVID, at least, again, from my American perspective, were Barack Obama and Arnold Schwarzenegger, who had been like,
really?
Yeah, you should read about that.
I didn't know that.
He had a mobile pandemic response team.
Wow.
Like, yeah. So the exact kind of thing that California probably really wishes it had when COVID broke out had been dismantled by the previous government. But Schwarzenegger was like, if this happens, we need to be ready. And you know what? I often agree with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
I mean,
and he was right about that.
He's right about a lot of things. The Predator movie, right, the whole time.
He was right. He was right about getting to the chopper
and like covering himself with mud. Remember that?
He was right about right about covering himself in mud. That crazy log trap with the spikes in it. Right about that.
Right about that. So let's go back to the nuclear thing. When government, the politician, their teams, the ministers, they get these predictions on what it's going to cost, the timeline it's going to happen, the risks that are involved. There's going to be a conversation, right? Like they're going to have a conversation with these owner operators, these energy companies.
Well, they are, but it's going to be hard for them to avoid the temptation of saying like, well, Darlington was great, so just go do that again, right? Like none of the new projects in Canada's nuclear portfolio substantially resemble the Darlington refurbishment, except other similar, can-do reactor overhauls. And even then, like we just talked about how Pickering kind of diverges from Darlington. But one of the other projects that's on our on OPG specifically, but Canada's nuclear kind of like to-do list is the Darlington SMR, right? So the Darlington SMR is going to be the first grid scale SMR if it finishes on time, which it won't. Okay, but if it does, it'll be the first grid scale
it could.
SMR.
No, it could. It could.
Nate, it's a first of a kind nuclear build.
There is no baseline, which means like you can just build it quick. No,
Yes,
I know
and
your blood is boiling because I'm saying these things, but it's
trying to
true.
give you a
It
heart
is a
attack.
first of its kind in the G7, G20. Like it's a first of its kind anywhere.
It's a first of its kind anywhere.
And it's going to be the baseline for, I guess, more
other
that are going to be built. So there's a lot that could go wrong.
Just ask the Apple Newton if being first to the interactive tablet party is good for business, like obviously that's different from building an SMR, but in many ways it kind of isn't. Like they're having to solve all of the technology problems for everyone that comes after them. Right. So it's a small pilot plant for that exact reason. That's why pilot projects exist, but it's still grid scale. It has a lot in common with the NPD, the nuclear power demonstrator, which was the first operational CANDU reactor at grid scale. And it was just a little guy, right? It would have qualified as an SMR in today's terms. And I've been to that site, and it's a very small site, and it was just meant as a demonstrator, and it ran for over 20 years.
Wow. Okay.
So like that's kind of I think what they're hoping for from this SMR build is like, it's a demonstrator, but it's going to run for a long time. Like we want it to be grid attached and doing its job for as long as it can do. Pun intended.
I was going to say that was really good, Albert.
Pretty good,
that was pretty good.
Yeah. Well, hang on, I'll take a bow. Okay. But anyway, point is that's the goal, right? So they're going to be solving all these problems from engineering to procurement to grid connection to operations and maintenance before everybody else does. So they have no benefit of lessons learned.
Yeah. I feel like there is so much in terms of a best practice that you can lift from Darlington, like those 8,000 lesson learned. I feel like you could, and maybe this is just I'm not knowledgeable, but there's a way that you could, procurement, the supply chain is going to be the same, right? Like you're going and getting.
Oh no, the
products.
Supply chain is not the same.
No?
The supply chain is not the same. Like big chunks of it may be the same because they're both power stations.
Okay.
Right. But to my earlier point, the Darlington refurb, the one that was scoped that we're talking about the performance on didn't include the steam generators, right? So you better bet there's going to be steam generators. And by the way, they're going to be different from the ones that are going in at Pickering. The new SMR, they're going to have two totally different sets.
Like virtually, they're going to be the same, the first of their kind, right? Like in terms of Okay.
Across the board, because the offtakes from the actual reactor are going to function differently. Like every single nuclear reactor in Canada right now is a CANDU, right?
Yep.
The new SMR has more in common with an ESBWR than it does with a CANDU. You guys can just Google that. But the point is that it's a boiling water reactor that uses enriched uranium. Right?
Yeah.
That's not what a CANDU is. Okay.
No.
So like all of even just like the operational expertise about what it takes to maintain a nuclear reactor in Canada, like we have none of it for ESBWRs. It's all for CANDUs.
Yeah.
Right. So, it's going to be an interesting thing to watch unfold. The worst case scenario is that they get afraid of like a validation estimate that happens a year from now and then cancel the project. That would be the worst possible thing, because somebody does need to take these first steps, bite the bullet, do the hard work, spend the extra money, and just get the thing done.
Well,
like somebody does have to do that.
Yeah, that would be bad. However, the Canadian government just secured a majority government. Secured, like it was a process, but I was reading that like Carney doesn't actually need to call an election until 2030, right? So I'm hoping that means that a lot of projects will just stay, because a lot of times when you see like changes in governance and politics, there's a lot of changes, right? New leaders come in, they have to put their stamp on projects, and everything gets reset. So we saw that in Toronto. We've seen it across Canada, whether it's transit projects, energy projects.
And that could be the kiss of death for these things too, because it's really, really easy for the new guys to come in and say, look what a terrible job the old guys did. Look at all these cost overruns. Like, and then, there's a branching path from there. Like, we're going to cancel the project, which is like, okay, great. So we're starting from scratch again, right? Or the other branching path is we're going to do better than the last guys, which like, no, you won't, but at least you're considering, moving forward. Right. So, and you kind of just have to let that be background noise.
Yeah.
But it also kind of isn't background noise, because it materially impacts how the projects get funded and who's running them.
Taxpayer dollars.
The temptation is always
right?
Yeah. Well, it is taxpayer dollars always, but like a lot of the ways to most responsibly spend those dollars run counter to what the first instincts of a politician might be when they come into office, right? Like, oh, the last guys were, tracking a 250% cost overrun. They're way behind schedule. Like, we should get rid of those guys. Yeah. It's like, so you should get rid of the only people on the planet who have experience with this project. That's what you're saying. Like, you want to fire all the people who know anything at all about what you're doing. Like, that's what you're saying you want to do.
You bring up a good point, right? Like, what are decision makers missing? In my mind, I'm thinking, like, I'm listening to you. It's like, what are they missing, right? Like, going back to the original comment, we're not expecting, ministers, staff, politicians, the prime minister, like, we're not expecting them to have the kind of expertise on capital projects to interpret, schedule and budget, et cetera. What would you say these politicians are missing with regard to these projects?
I mean, there is a lot that you could, stack on that heap there. But
okay, top three. What's the top three?
Top three.
Yeah.
Well, I've already covered one, which is that a lot of these are going to be either first of their kind or first in a while or first in the geography, right? Like, if we do build a high-speed rail network, in Canada, it'll be the first time anyone has done that in 50 years, right? Which means that it's all new teams, it's all new engineering inputs, it's all new everything, right? New supply chain, the whole thing's new, right? Pointing at existing trains saying, well, we built it before. It's like, yeah, you built it with technology from the 70s. Congratulations. Like, it's not the 70s anymore. Like, we need to do different things, right? So first time is a big one. Another one is that all projects run over, especially if they're first of a kind or in nuclear, which, we just talked about the SMR as like the golden nexus of both of those things. Yeah. Like, that project is going to run over and take longer, Nate. Mark my words. Okay.
You heard it here first, folks.
Yeah. I really hope this isn't the first place you've heard that, but if it is,
surprise. I think our listeners are quite educated when it comes to these capital projects. So
politicians are not, right? And like, that's the point. So like, they need to be aware that, like, earlier we kind of quipped that when Carney says 1 trillion, he means 2 or maybe 3. That is a mindset that I would love to instill in your average politician. Of like, I have back pocket contingency when I say a number out loud, right? Yeah. Like, if I go to Davos and I say $1 trillion, it's because I actually am thinking 2, right? And for a lot of reasons that I don't fully understand as a projects person, they politically must say the lower number. I don't know. Like, we have to do that internally as projects people.
But it's kind of a hot potato for them to come out and say that number and then not, to say 1 trillion and then go 2. Like, wouldn't it be better to go 2 and then actually come in at 1? Like, I feel like it would, but maybe that's not feasible.
I think so. But like, I also think that a good model for how we should be doing all of our everything is Star Trek.
How so?
Right? Where it's a bunch of credulous technocrats living in a future where everybody is pulling in the same direction. They believe everything everybody else is saying all the time. Like, we are all trusting of each other and trying to pull in the same direction. The idea that you can like lie and cheat and steal to get one over on your fellow man, it was kind of sort of there in original Trek somewhat. It disappeared from Next Generation, DS9, Voyager, and then came back in some of the new Trek stuff. But like, generally speaking, the Star Trek future is one in which where humans are just trying to work together to solve difficult problems, right? But humans are not trying to work together to solve difficult problems here in actual reality.
I was going to say you lost me at hello, but I heard the first part and the last part about humans working together.
Well, I hope you enjoyed my little diatribe about Star Trek. You
and the Pope actually agree, right? We need to like work together and be like. Anyways, it's stuff that he said that Trump jumped on. But
I love, like, I read a pundit who calls him Pope Chicago Bob. I do love Pope Chicago Bob. He's a real force for good in the world, or he's shaping up to be one. But the Pope can say he wants us all to work together all he wants to. That isn't going to magically make it so. Make it so. There's a little Star Trek reference for you, in case you're anyway.
Blank face here.
It's okay.
If
that
you're not watching
you,
the video, you can see like my
else.
my eyes just went really glassy. Okay,
that was for you. Yeah. Okay, but anyway. The point is that if you say 2 trillion, right, it's a little bit like the water will continue flowing into the bucket until it fills the $2 trillion line, right? If you say $1 trillion, then the bucket is at least principally smaller. So you kind of start thinking about the project as a smaller, more confined thing. You try to track, because like the point isn't to manage a $2 trillion set of projects or portfolio of projects. It's to manage a $1 trillion portfolio of projects that will, through natural, factors, grow to be 2 trillion.
Yeah.
Right. So thinking that you have the bigger bucket will tempt you to fill it, and then your problem just doubles. Right. That's one issue. The other is that I don't necessarily trust that we can't, like, if Mark Carney's going to say a number out loud, we as a country, like Canada, has no project controls framework, right, at all. There is nothing at the federal level that says here's how you should estimate projects, here's how you should schedule projects, here are basic guidelines for quality. Like, there's nothing like that at the federal level. There's no established controls framework. This is my thing 3, by the way.
Okay, good.
Like, to manage a large portfolio, that could crest 500 billion or even $1 trillion in total spend, right? You need some unified rules about what, because we have rules about how you bill the government for work, and how you get awarded work by the government, and what it should say in your contracts and things like that. But it's not at the project controls level, right?
Yeah.
There is no equivalent of the PMO for Canada. Like in the US, there effectively is one. It's called the General Services Administration, the GSA, right? The GSA has oversight authority over all U.S. projects.
Trump would like
does
that.
Have, like,
by the way,
I'm sure he would. But putting that to one side,
Canada is not
the
for
GSA
sale,
has
folks.
a project management system. No, it sure isn't. But Canada has I keep doing it.
I know.
Like the U.S. has a project management system through the GSA. They have capital programming and estimation requirements through the Office of Management and Budget. Anything that's spending public money there is a framework to apply to it. The same is not true in Canada, right? So we're kind of, to some degree, we're trying to chart new courses without a map.
I feel like that is so related to that. The programs, around mining, because right now there's a bunch of projects that are accelerating here in Canada just for natural resources, because we're, lithium, rare earths, gold, like there's a ton of stuff going on, nickel, and there's like this constant battle about, like, just the mine itself is a program, but then there's this like larger infrastructure. I mean, mines are really just infrastructure, right? Because you're building around them. There's energy, there's roads, there's rail, there's waste, like lots and lots of things that go into a mining program. But then there's this like constant bickering over who builds what, it seems like. Yeah.
Well, I hope that the last part isn't true. The first part definitely is. Like, you've got a lot of stuff to build if you're going to set up a new mine. But, two things. Like, one, mining is a pretty mature industry in Canada. Like, we do a lot of mineral extraction, of all types. Like, even if I'm here in Alberta, you're over in Ontario, like, you're doing a lot of downhole mineral extraction, traditional, like, deep bore mining, blowing stuff up and taking the things out, right? Like, that's happening a lot in Ontario. The whole Ring of Fire project, or portfolio bundle, I should say, in the MPO is about building a road network around that to
service all the progress,
all that stuff, right? So like having that as its own separate project is strategically, I think, really smart, because it kind of takes some of that away, right? Because, like, mining company A isn't going to want to build mining company B's infrastructure, right? Not knowing what haul trucks are going to run over it, how much damage it's going to do, like, who's going to maintain it, who's going to upkeep it, like, is it going to be sized for everybody? Like, you build the infrastructure as its own program. That's a pretty common thing to do when you have a large group of projects that need to all get executed at the same time, is you treat the infrastructure component as its own separate project, right? So that I think is encouraging. And like I said, like, it's not like we don't have expertise in that. Like, Canada builds a lot of roads and they build a lot of mines. So, like, that should be the part that should be the slammest of dunks for us.
Like, there's not really something that decision makers are missing with regard to the infrastructure of mines, because it is so mature, right? Like, when we talk about energy, it's first of its kind. Mines are a little bit of a different ballgame, right? We've been there, done that over and over again.
Yeah.
Like, in fact, I know for a fact that 60 to 70% of the mining's investment globally flows through just Toronto, right? Because of the number of mines here, mining companies here, PDAC, the Prospectors and Developers Association of Canada, mineral exploration. There's a lot happening in Canada, so it's not the same, right?
Yeah.
Like politicians know there's not a lot that they miss about.
No,
mining.
well, the politicians might though, because like they're going to be looking at the mine itself as the whole picture. So you were spot on when you were saying there's all this other stuff that needs to happen, and the Ring of Fire is a good example of like being aware of that, at least to some degree. But the whole point, and this ties back to what I was saying earlier, is that the government, or at least the MPO, or at least the projects themselves, need some kind of controls framework established for both for scope development, estimate development, schedule development, setting contingencies, figuring out how to expend them, like who gets what and when and how, like all that stuff needs to be put together before they're finished defining the project scope.
Yeah, before shovels hit the ground, for sure. Does the
certainly before then, but I'm talking about like even before major procurement begins.
Right,
like
before
they should be
budgets
working
are
on this
approved.
right now.
Right.
Yes.
So
exactly.
the MPO, the Major Projects Office, for everyone who doesn't know that acronym and folks that are outside of Canada, is in Calgary, set up by the Carney government, right? And so they're fast tracking projects. Do they have, like you mentioned, controls? They don't have a framework for this?
No, not yet.
No.
They're supposed to be establishing one. I'm fuzzy on the details, but it's sometime between now and I want to say July. But I'd need to do a little bit of additional reading on that. But the point is that no. I mean, the short answer is no. There is no established control framework at the moment.
Albert, the enthusiasm for these projects is real. Politicians, ministers, they are all over this. They're all about nation building, whether it's at the federal or provincial level. The will is real, right? They're definitely getting behind that. But the statistics that you mentioned before, there's a gap, right, between the cost of the price tag and what it's actually going to cost and what is baked in, et cetera. Considering that Carney just clinched a majority government, and we saw a bunch of is it aisle crossing? I think it's floor crossing.
I would say aisle.
Aisle is American.
Is it floor?
Yep. So in Canada,
goodness.
It's called crossing the floor.
I wrote aisle into our show notes,
because
by the way, so.
I know why. But there are plenty of floor crossing conservatives, right? And there was a commitment to the centrism, and broad, I think, solid support for his agenda, right? And
yeah, there is.
Yeah. So the question, what do MPs, if you had to give one piece of advice, what do MPs, especially those with big government funded projects on the horizon, what do they need to know about how capital projects and programs actually work in real life?
I'm gonna run through that, rapid fire, because a lot of it is stuff that we've already discussed earlier in the show. So I mean, number one with a bullet is your two choices aren't deliver the project for the number you said or don't. Your two choices are deliver the project for more and know about it in advance, or deliver the project for more and be surprised by it during construction, right? So projects run over, they just do. They run over on cost, typically also on schedule. We shouldn't be counting on a $500 billion portfolio costing $500 billion or $1 trillion portfolio costing $1 trillion, because it won't, right? The research is absolutely unambiguous on this. We are going to spend more. So, that brings me to point two. We've got to get that controls framework established, right? Like a lot of what made Darlington work was having a solid team that had done this kind of work before, operating in a mature controls framework, which we were a part of building, right? Yep. So we're not coming at this as, we're not Johnny come lately to the major project controls game. Like, we've been there, we've done that. We understand what it takes to do this. And the time to do it is now, before the scope is fully defined, before you're married to a number, right? Mm-hmm. Like, the time to do it is now, because as soon as you establish good risk practice, you're going to realize that your numbers and your schedule both grew dramatically. So in a way, that's an opportunity, because when the schedule grows, it pushes cost out. We have a whole episode about this. So you can run more things at the same time, right? So if they're not thinking about that, then productivity goes into the toilet, right? If they are thinking about that, productivity stays flat and the projects just take longer. And that's fine, right? So things like that need to be integrated into those early planning discussions, like right now. So, two good examples of projects, or three, I guess, where these things are are really pressing considerations, like right this very second, are the Pickering refurbishment, the SMR project, and the new Alberta pipeline, right? Because you may remember the MOU between the Alberta government and Ottawa, which was kind of like an unprecedented thing, which means that every single element is totally untested, right? What that tells me is that if Alberta is going to get that pipeline built through BC, through First Nations land, they better get to work right now figuring out how they're going to manage all of that. And like, I know that they're hard at work on it, but there's going to be elements of it that don't get considered, and I'm worried that the project management elements are among those. So anyway, those are big concerns for me as an Albertan, but also just generally as a Canadian. Like, we need to make sure those controls exist. So, and the idea that the numbers will just naturally grow over time, it's a bit of a fallacy. Like, they do, and I've been saying something like that this whole time, but it's not like you can't tell what it's likely to cost. You can't, right? We have a lot of historical data, and this is another thing. Like, use the data at your fingertips. You're not going to do it better than the last guys. Like, okay, I hope you will. You should try, but the evidence is pretty overwhelming that project performance has not improved dramatically over the past 90 years. We're still doubling, tripling, fat-tailed projects like nuclear.
Yeah.
Right. That we're still doing that. So we need to plan on that. Being the case, we can do a little better. Perhaps we can't do dramatically better. Like, we can't do 300% better, right? Like, we need to plan on incremental improvements that happen a little bit at a time, and we need to start planning for those improvements right stinking now. So, you asked earlier about knowledge transfer, historical data, documented lessons learned, even the people from those teams, those people are all gold mines of information about what could go wrong on a big capital development. And I was kind of poo-pooing the idea that all of that knowledge is transferable, and not all of it is, right? But some of it is, and some of the general concepts certainly are. So those people, when the new guys come in and they're like, they ran over by 200%, fire everybody. It's like, well, that's a pretty destructive instinct. So I guess that's my thing. Like, number one, count on it costing more and taking longer, okay? Number two, build a controls framework to allow for that to happen, and still have the project be under control, right? Number three, start nailing the scopes of some of these really serious, like, nation building projects, especially the first of their kind ones, or the ones that have extreme schedule pressure. And number four, don't just fire everybody. Okay, keep some of the people so that you can keep their knowledge too.
And there you have it. All right. Thanks, Al. That's great. That was a good discussion. Thanks, Albert.
Thank you, Nate. Appreciate it.
All right. See y'all later.
Hey, everybody. It's Albert here. Thanks for tuning in to the Risky Planner podcast. We hope today's conversation was informative and, above all else, inspires you to excellence in what you do. If you liked today's episode, don't forget to rate, subscribe, and leave a review. It helps us reach more listeners just like you. I'd also like to thank Thompson Igbo for letting us use his excellent music on our show. If you like what you hear, check him out at igbomusic.com. That's EGBO music.com. Talk at you later.